Hey everybody, welcome to episode 95 of In the Zone. I'm Giancarlo Aulino hosting today with Chris Martelli and missing Anthony Pagniello. He's still out of action for a little bit. We're hoping to get him back for next week. But Chris, got to kick this off with some interesting trade bait that we saw this morning. TSN released this list and it includes number one, Matt Murray, number two, JVR. But somewhere in this top five, we see Patrick Laine. Do you see Winnipeg making a big move like this with Patrick Laine?
If they do, it's because of the meeting that they will have in about a month or so. We talked about this last year a bit. Remember when we were looking at all the RFAs, talking about Marner, Kachuk, Connor, all these guys are all RFAs. Laine was also in that. And they gave him a bridge deal because, quite frankly, when we were talking about Laine and the contract discussions came up, he just didn't seem interested in a bridge deal whatsoever. I think he looked at what Austin Matthews got, and he really thought that he was on his level, so he wanted to get around 11 million. And kudos to Kevin Cheveldayoff for putting his foot down and saying, you know what, you're not an elite centerman in this league. You're an elite winger who can get 50 goals. That's your ceiling. And when you look at that, $11 million is not really in the cards. And then, yes, of course, you can talk about Artemi Panarin and what he got last year. But I'm sorry, Patrick Laine, unless he really does some growing up, I don't see him as a Hart Trophy candidate like Panarin was this year. But it's like you said, Aulino, it's very interesting to see a young stud like Patrick Laine on the trade bait board. I don't really know what this means for them. I don't know if this means they're just going to flat out give up on contract talks because they know it's not going to work out. But if this means that, it allows them to get maybe a better defenseman or maybe a couple more first round picks, because we all know Blake Wheeler, I think he's 33 now. He doesn't have, I'll say he maybe has another two elite strong years, and maybe after that you could start passing the torch to a guy like a Scheifele. He could lead the way as captain. But I don't know, Alino. I think if Laine gets traded, we're going to see a big haul come back in Winnipeg, and I think it has to. Like we talk about with the Leafs so many times, their biggest need is defense. And I look at Winnipeg, and we talked about Trouba got traded, Bufflin left, a couple other guys left the team. Like their blue line was shot this year, and Connor Hellebuck was a Vezina Trophy candidate. I actually think he's going to win the Vezina Trophy this year. So I think if you get the same play from Connor Hellebuck next year, and you can maybe get an extra defenseman, if you trade Patrick Laine, then I think again we'll be saying that Winnipeg is a contender in the near future. I mean, we've been saying it for like 3 years now, and they haven't been able to get the job done. But I think if you can trade a guy like Laine, get some key assets back, maybe a top four defense, and maybe you could even get a Pietrangelo, because we're talking about Nylander for Pietrangelo, or for the rights of Pietrangelo. Isn't Laine's trade value higher than Nylander's? I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah.
So I think with that, maybe they're in the running to maybe get Pietrangelo if Laine board. But it's very interesting to monitor.
Yeah, if Laine goes, like, that's – I know what he did there with the 2 years, because after the first year you can negotiate the bigger extension, go into that year with a little bit more uncertainty, and then after put more pressure on Winnipeg. But the way they played in the playoffs, I think they might be willing to maybe trade Laine if they can get some more help on their team, maybe get a better defensive core. And their goaltending's amazing with Hellebuck. I think they did well with him and there's development. They didn't rush him in when they had Pavlik. They kind of eased him into the role. But another name that kind of jumps out at this list is Arizona's Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Darcy Kemper. These are some big contracts, especially Ekman-Larsson. That's a huge contract for a team to take on. Do you even see him moving on, or do you see Kemper being the likely one to go?
Believe it or not, I can see Ekman-Larsson going. And here's the reason why. I feel like they're all in on Chychrun. I think this is going to be the guy for the future. I think Ekman-Larsson, yeah, I think he's still relatively young. I think he's 29 or 30 now. But I think when we look at teams and, what to expect from, teams that are kind of in and out of the playoffs like the Arizona Coyotes, you got to remember, Aulino, like look how young their team is. I mean, you have Clayton Keller, a very young player, a very skilled player. They're definitely not going to sign Phil Kessel. They're definitely not going to sign Taylor Hall. I don't know if this means trading Ekman Larson just to get back assets, kind of like Winnipeg. But if they do trade Ekman Larson, I guarantee you it's for the emergence and for the evolving skill and inevitability of him being the number one defenseman in Jacob Chikrin. Because when he got drafted, I thought he was the top 5 pick. I think he can be absolutely tremendous. It's probably going to take him a little bit more time. Like, look at what we're seeing right now, Aulino, from Shea Theodore on Vegas. I mean, he got traded from Anaheim, and now he's looking like a Norris Trophy candidate. So I think if you can trade an Ekman Larson just to have a Chikrin evolve into a Norris Trophy type D, I think if I'm the GM of Arizona, I'm open to doing that. But in terms of Darcy Kemper, I don't really know, man. Like, I know there's a lot of free agent goaltenders out there, Corey Crawford, Markstrom. We talked a little bit about that last week. But I think Darcy Kemper and Antti Ranta, they're 2 great goaltenders, and they bring a pretty relative cheap cap hit. And I don't see Darcy Kemper leaving. And if he does leave, maybe if I'm Edmonton, maybe I can snag him. But for now, I have OEL, believe it or not, being the more likely to get dealt between the two.
Yeah, and like looking at their team, like if they really want to go in that direction, I think Taylor Hall might be a free agent. Like I don't think you want to sign him, but if I'm a team knowing that there's a cap freeze, I think Phil Kessel is going to be a lot more valuable for some teams because he has 1 or 2 years left on his deal. And if you can get Arizona to retain some salary, I think the return will be much greater than just signing Taylor Hall as a free agent because in the playoffs, we saw Kessel play. He was on the power play anchoring that team, and his success in the playoffs might help a lot. Like I'm looking at Edmonton. That could be a good team for him. Toronto's not likely because they already have a 1.2 until his contract's over. But teams that are just on that cusp, they need that one extra forward. I would go after Phil Kessel in Arizona. Maybe tell them if you retain half his salary, we'll give you a first rounder, maybe a third, and a top prospect. But could Phil Kessel, do you think, impact another team right now, or is it just something that you rather wait for the deadline?
It's crazy to talk about Phil like that, but I think he can impact any team. I think he's still got some juice left in the tank. I think he's 31, 32. Yes, he had a down year this year, but I think the expectations were way too high for him. I mean, I've personally had him in fantasy the last couple of years, and he's been a top 3 player on my team the last 2 years. So I think if you're going to have those expectations for Phil, you're out of your mind now. I mean, he's now on the west side of 30 years old. He's on the other side. He's looking like an experienced veteran, and he's in a role where I think he's perfect. I think he knows that maybe 60 points is perfect right now. He's not a 90-point guy anymore. He's not on a power play with one of the best players of all time in Sidney Crosby. So we got to get that out of our heads that he's going to get 90 points because I don't think he is anymore. But like, there's so many teams out there that would love a Phil Kessel right now. And me personally, I'm a New Jersey Devils fan. I have been for quite some time. Phil Kessel going to New Jersey would be absolutely amazing for a guy like a Jack Hughes or like a Nico Hischier, a guy that centerman. They definitely need that winger that they haven't had yet. Even a guy maybe like a Sean Monahan. Maybe you can add a little bit more depth in Calgary. I know Matt Tkachuk is generating that first line left wing spot, and you have Gaudreau on the right wing. But imagine having Phil Kessel on that second line with like a Backlund. That would be absolutely incredible for Calgary. Another team, let's go to Columbus because, again, they don't really have that scoring flair as much as they used to. I mean, they had Duchesne, they had Panarin, they had to get rid of them. So now I could see Phil Kessel even maybe being with a Pierre-Luc Dubois. You could boost that confidence. He can feed it to Dubois or vice versa. And even you have a Cam Atkinson who can score 40 goals. So maybe Phil Kessel can get a little bit more assists if he were to go to Columbus. A lot of people, the expectations I think are too high for Phil. I think he's still a relatively outstanding player still in this league. And I think a lot of teams would still be very happy to get Phil Kessel.
And speaking of teams that might be happy with a guy still on their good contract, 1 year left on it though, but the Leafs with Frederick Andersen, it's getting some interesting buzz surrounding his name. His contract is getting the interest of the Carolina Hurricanes, who are they already have Jake Gardiner, they have Brady Shea on the back, they have all these guys that they've really accumulated from trades, helping their roster right now. So if you're Carolina, do you go after Frederick Andersen, or is he not really the fit with Mrazek and Reimer playing so well for them?
Oh, absolutely. You have to go. If I'm Carolina, I'm not even thinking twice about that. Mrazek and Reimer, that I guess they were great together down the stretch for Carolina. But Carolina, to me, I've been saying this since, I'll say, February. They've had one of the most deadly offenses. And it's pretty funny to say that because I think 3 years ago they were bottom 5 in goals for. So now you have an elite guy in Svechnikov that goes after Dahlin in the 2018 draft. And his rookie year, he dropped 40, and then the year after that, he dropped 70. So I expect Svechnikov to take an even bigger leap next year. I think Aho is an absolute outstanding player. But in terms of their goaltending, I think that's the only flaw on their whole team. So if I'm Rod Brindamore, I am without a doubt going after Frederick Andersen. And if they get Frederick Andersen, watch out East, because the Carolina Hurricanes will be coming strong and they would be a contender. But it's funny that you say Carolina, because I'm looking at this trade bait board, and who else is on it? Dougie Hamilton and Ryan Dzingel. So if this all makes sense and adds up correctly, at least how I envision it in my head, we could maybe be seeing a Frederick Andersen and our first, and maybe a Jeremy Bracco going to Carolina for maybe a Dougie Hamilton and a Ryan Dzingel.
Full circle. Dougie Hamilton back after that big trade for Boston. Do you think they need, though, like, I know Dougie Hamilton, I would not mind having him, but being a puck-moving defenseman, should they really, I guess, set their sights on more the defensive guy, or is that just too good to pass up if you're Toronto?
That's a tough question. Again, like, we need the defensive defenseman a little more, but I think Dougie Hamilton can adjust his game to being that more defensive defenseman. I think he's now 28, 29. I think if he were to go to Toronto and see the skill of a guy like Erasmus Sandin and Morgan Riley carrying the puck, I think Dougie Hamilton wouldn't mind playing second or third fiddle. I mean, he just came off a Norris Trophy almost season, and then he got injured. So his trade value has probably never been higher right now. So, but same with Freddie Andersen. I think his trade value is – he just had a .926 save in the series against Columbus. So I think Freddie Andersen, the last 4 years, it speaks for his. He speaks for himself. His value's high, but I do agree with you. I think we do need a little more maybe defensive guy, but it might be too good to pass up, man. Dougie Hamilton just had an absolutely fantastic year, and maybe having Dougie Hamilton with Morgan Riley, that sounds really good.
Another trade that I was looking at, somebody, editor in Leaf over here, is proposing a trade of William Nylander, Alex Kerfoot, and the rights to Travis Dermott to Florida for, I can't believe that I'm saying this, Aaron Ekblad and Svechnikov. Oh, not Svechnikov. What the hell am I saying? It's Aaron Ekblad and the rights, I guess. I can't even say this thing's not even loading here. But whoever is $5.5 million cap hit over there on the back end. Are you doing this if you're Toronto?
Oh, was this Strawman?
Yeah, it is Strawman. All right. Yeah, Strawman.
I mean, you're getting your defensive defenseman like that. We're getting our guy, Aaron Ekblad's from here. I think that would be. I'm doing that. I mean, I know Ekblad hasn't had the strong numbers. I mean, his expectations coming in, of course, you get exceptional status and you're the best defenseman and you go first overall. But I mean, that his role is not to get 70 points. His role is to get 40 and shut down the team's best players. And he's relatively done that. And when a team like Florida has Keith Yandel and he's just flowing and gelling on the power play, do you really expect Ekblad to get 50 points? Because I definitely have not expected that for the last 2-3 years. So you trade Dermott, you trade Nylander, and you trade Kerfoot. That's that's quite a bit of cap right there. That's potentially like $15 million, maybe more in cap. And then you're probably getting 15 mil back, maybe a little under just for a player less. I'm doing that because that's the fit, that's the need that we need. We need Aaron Ekblad. I mean, I can't believe we're talking about Aaron Ekblad and Dougie Hamilton potentially being leads, but if that's the case, sign me up. I'd love to have either or. And again, we've been saying this for weeks. It's inevitable that William Nylander, I think, is getting traded. So if this were to be a trade, absolutely pull the trigger on it. I want me some Aaron Ekblad.
So if they get Aaron Ekblad, let's say they can find some wiggle room with some of the other salaries, and they go after Alex Pietrangelo. Is that too much money then in the back end? Is that going to be the reverse of what we had this year with the offense?
Wow, if we get Pietrangelo and Ekblad, I mean, try and trade Tavares at that point because we'll be in cap hell for sure. But like if that sounds way too good to be true. That's like an NHL 20 GM mode type thing where you have Ekblad, Riley, Pietrangelo, Muzzin as your sixth defenseman. That's ridiculous. If that were to happen, Aulino, then that means Sandin and Liljegren are gone. I mean, they wouldn't really develop, and they would be probably upset with the situation that they got themselves in. But if we get Ekblad, I don't see us getting Pietrangelo, but I think that's even better off because he's younger. So yeah, it's a win-win.
I don't know. It'd be interesting. Like, I don't know. I hate this. The only thing. It's like with the Knicks. Like, you're rumored to get every single free agent, and then after none of them show up, none of them sign. So hopefully the Leafs you're not getting everyone's hopes up. At least you can get one of them. That'd be nice. Just get some help there. But another name that's actually was interesting, Max Domi from Montreal. He had a nice little resurgence there when he got traded. So he changed management, so that looks like he could be traded, work out a deals. But I don't know the fit right there. A lot of people are saying the Leafs, but I don't know. Do they have something that Montreal would want? Like, I don't know what kind of trade you can do for Max Domi right now.
Yeah, Max Domi's a tough name to grasp right now. I think I still don't really know what his offensive upside is. A lot of people are saying it's 70 points. I don't think it's that high. I'll say 55 to 65.
Yeah.
He's a guy that he can bring you grit. You know, he's kind of like he's a poor man's Matt Tkachuk. He's relatively the same player, just offensively a tier under Tkachuk. But I don't know. Like, I want to say maybe a team like Detroit that's just kind of going all in and getting the feels of almost any player in free agency. They're a team that, again, their expectations and their organization are not so high, at least I believe so. Dylan Larkin, Anthony Mantha, they have great young players there, but I think right now they know that they're not a playoff team, and maybe they can try and trade a young defenseman. I know they have Chalowski. He's looking to be pretty solid. Hronek is another guy that could maybe be dealt for a Max Domi. They have a lot of first-round picks, and the first-round picks will probably be relatively high, and we all know how Bergevin is. He always tries to move up in the draft somehow. So maybe this might sound crazy, but maybe Max Domi to Detroit isn't maybe out of the question. I'd like to maybe see Max Domi play with a Dylan Larkin. I think that those two guys complement each other perfectly. You have the skilled center in Larkin, and you have the gritty winger in Max Domi. So I think that would be a perfect fit for Domi. I know that, you know, maybe him juggling teams this early in his career can maybe affect confidence, but I think it's Max Domi. I think he'll be fine at the end of the day. And if he doesn't get traded, I think that's good for him too, because I think he's found his groove in Montreal. I think he had 65 points last year, and this year I think he had 60. So I think he's found his groove, and maybe him and Drouin down the line can be something special with Nick Suzuki. So I think in terms of Domi, I think it's all up to Bergevin if he wants to be patient with his core or not.
And the final name on this trade board list is, he hasn't had the best of years, but he seems to be attracting a lot of attention, is Matt Murray of Pittsburgh. So we know they have to make changes. They can't come back with that same roster. They saw what happened this year. They get all these trades at the deadline, even before, and they get bounced by Montreal. So if it's not one of those three pillars that they had in Letang, Crosby, Malkin leaving, you have to trade a guy like Matt Murray. Just what is a return for a guy like that? I know he has the 2 cups early on in his career, but he hasn't had the best of years these back-to-back seasons of .890 save percentage.
I really don't know with Matt Murray. I mean, I remember when he came out of nowhere and he took Fleury's spot, I was kind of surprised. I was like, okay, well, Fleury, he's 31 at the time, and Matt Murray was 23, and everyone's, oh, Matt Murray, this guy's going to be the future of the team. And then, he won the cup for them, and then Fleury got, we all know what happened. He went to Vegas, and then they almost won the cup. And we're seeing the same trend. Tristan Jarry down the line has outplayed Matt Murray, plain and simple. We can clearly see it. Just like last year with Jordan Binnington and Jake Allen. Same thing. Jake Allen was the starter for the Blues for, I'd say, 2 or 3 years after Elliott got dealt. They went with Jake Allen, and then a younger guy came in, and Jordan Binnington took his spot. And I think that's the same thing here. I think Tristan Jarry came in, and he knew that he had an opportunity to relatively maybe grab the number one starting job in Pittsburgh, and he did it. And he did a fantastic job this season. And Matt Murray, the last 2 years, I know he's had a very tough personal life the last couple of years, but he has to bounce back in some way. And I think if Pittsburgh and Jim Rutherford are looking to trade Matt Murray, I really don't know what team would look at him because of the stats that he's had the last 2 years. And yes, he's a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, but the numbers are they're not good at all. I mean, he had I think a 904 last year, and then I think an 897 this year. So if I'm maybe Edmonton, maybe you can trade for Matt Murray, but I really don't know what the trade would look like. Like, are you trading a young defenseman? Are you trading a winger? Are you trading like a Yamamoto? Like, I don't even know who you have to trade. Do you have to trade a young up-and-coming forward? Do you have to trade a roster defenseman? Like, I really don't know what Jim Rutherford would want for Matt Murray. So he's probably going to get – the likelihood of him getting traded is high because he's number one on the board. But I don't know what the return is going to be, and it's going to be interesting to see who goes and grabs him in the long run.
Should you package them if you're Jim Rutherford with a Letang and say, okay, I'm giving you 2 of these top guys that we have on our roster. I'm going to put Letang in there, who still has some years left in him, but do you think that might sweeten the deal and get a better return than just trading Matt Murray up front?
You see, when you talk about like a haul like that, like Letang and Murray, those are 2 potentially, like, their trade values are probably ridiculously high still, both of them. I think Letang is still relatively a top 30 defenseman in the league. And again, like Aulino, like we talk about teams, like getting players. I don't know who would get Letang and Murray at the same time. I have no idea which team would go out and say, hey, I want Letang and Murray, and I'll give you a haul of players. I don't know. Would it be Edmonton? Would it be Minnesota? Would it be LA? Like, I have no idea, man. Like, the thing with Matt Murray and Chris Letang in Pittsburgh in general is they're a team that we talk about Malkin Crosby being on the same team for over a decade, almost 2 decades now. And they've been contenders every single year. And I still think that's the case. Even if you trade Letang and Murray, you have Crosby, Malkin, Gunsel. That is a great core. And yes, 2 of them are over 30 years old. Gunsel's 25. But those 3 players are they're superb offensively. So, again, I have no idea what the asking price is. I have no idea, man.
Probably Edmonton. Like, Nuge probably 100% would have to go the other way. I think they need a guy like that. Could help balance the lines. If you're just trading Letang, like, I know Mike Green recently retired, so that's a huge hole for Edmonton. They thought they had something with him. Athanasiou could be another guy, but again, like, yeah, that's something for one. I don't know if any player can, or any team actually with this cap freeze, if they can get both of them, unless you do a 3-way trade, get creative. But Pittsburgh for sure, there's going to be a lot of changes there. But Chris, anything left you want to talk about in hockey?
I want to quickly ask, I think now I'm thinking about it with that package with Murray and Letang, I could actually see Edmonton going full throttle with that, because now that I'm thinking about it, you have Ethan Bear on defense. You have Evan Bouchard, who they drafted not last year, in 2018. and he's looking. He captained London this year, and he was probably the best captain in the O. So maybe Jim Rutherford's looking at Evan Bouchard for the future, and then you can maybe trade Nugent Hopkins, so you have Nugent, Evan Bouchard for maybe Murray and Letang. But again, the cap would be something that would hurt them. I think at the end of the day, they would also have to maybe try and trade Koskinen's contract or maybe Adam Larson. And if you can maybe package Adam Larson before they do that deal, so like you trade Larson to, I don't know, like LA, and you maybe trade Koskinen to Minnesota, and then that's when you could pull off the Murray and Letang for Bouchard and Nugent Hopkins. If I'm Jim Rutherford, I'm doing that, and if I'm Edmonton, I'm doing that. So, I mean, I just made a trade for everyone out there. I think that would be a good trade, Murray and Letang for Nuge and Evan Bouchard, but that is knowing that Koskinen's cap hit and Larson's cap hit are off the books for Edmonton.
Yeah, that's true. Because Edmonton, if you already have Draisaitl, McDavid, like these are the kind of years you can take chances like that. They're long term. They're both in their early to mid 20s. 1 year in Pittsburgh situation, it's one that's a little bit more risky with those guys because Crosby and Malkin are both in their mid 30s. So I'll have to wait and see on that. But onto the court, because we first saw a Game 7 of the first round end finally. Houston is going to be playing against OKC later on, but the game that we saw, Denver and Utah, man, Canadian kid, Jamal Murray, lighting it up in the earlier games. We saw Donovan Mitchell play his heart out. What are your thoughts on that Game 7 and just those two guys?
What a series it was. This was the best series in the first round by far. You talk about competitiveness. It doesn't get any more competitive than Jamal Murray versus Donovan Mitchell. Those two guys brought the best out of each other. They both averaged well over 30 points per game in this series. Both of them dropped 50 points twice. They now only join Allen Iverson and Michael Jordan to do that in a series. And that's ridiculous. How do you go from two guys doing it to four? And, Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray, I'll say this right now, they're the future of the West. We talk about guys like Doncic. We talk about guys like Zion who are going to be the future of – they're going to be the best players. But when I'm talking about just the future of the league, Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell are going to be those underrated all-star type players that no one really discusses. And I'm so happy that ESPN, guys like Kellerman and Stephen A., they've been consistently talking about this series because every time I've watched these games – I was just in awe. Like Jamal Murray would go down the court, he would drop 50 points, no turnovers. Who does that? And then Donovan Mitchell the next game would drop 50 points, and then the next game after that Murray would drop 40. So they're just going back and forth. They're trying to one up each other, and that's what competition is all about. It's about getting the better of your opponent, and they both showed that. And then at the end of the day, it sucked for Utah. They were up 3-1. They blow the lead and they lose the series. I think they're only the 12th team ever to do that. But the first time to do it since the Golden State Warriors in 2016 in the finals. But I mean, like Donovan Mitchell should not be upset at himself. He played his ass off. He knows that this team has a relatively bright future. I mean, me as an NBA fan, I relatively believe that unless they're gonna split the duo up. But I think now we all know that whole COVID dilemma I think they're well past that now. I think Gobert and Mitchell's chemistry is great. And I think they're going to come back better than ever next year. And I think that loss is going to motivate them even more. And I think Donovan Mitchell is going to be very scary next year. But in terms of the Denver Nuggets, I got to give them a lot of credit. When you're down 3-1, it's always tough. The odds are really against you, and they really came together as a team, and they really pulled it off. And yes, it was pretty funny because the final score in yesterday's game was 80-78, and there was one game there where Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray combined for 97 points. So it was pretty funny to see that yesterday's game was so low scoring, but I'm very happy for the way that Denver and Utah competed against each other. And at the end of the day, the more consistent and better team won this series in Denver. So kudos to both teams. It was a fun series.
Yeah, and Utah with Mike Conley. So he was playing a little bit better. I like to see that he finally was starting to get back in the mix of things. Like he had a season where he struggled a little bit, so that was good to see him in the playoffs. Like at least get some of his value shown to the Utah fan base. But going forward now, we got Denver taking on the Clippers. And I don't know, like last week I was just talking about, or 2 weeks ago, I was talking about Denver maybe being a dark horse, even though they were top three, but under the radar in terms of how they can challenge in the West. But I see Jokic as a problem for the Clippers. I don't think they have a real match for that. Could Denver shock the Clippers here?
I mean, at this point in time, anything is possible. They came back from 3-1. Look at OKC too. A lot of people just wrote them off completely when we saw them go up against Houston. It's like, okay, you have Harden and Westbrook, the dynamic backcourt. Chris Paul, he's absolutely incredible, but does he really have the help to beat the Houston Rockets? And here we are now, a Game 7. It's going to be decided tonight. So I think, Aulino, in terms of the Clippers and the Nuggets, anything is possible. Look at the Mavericks. If Porzingis didn't get hurt, I don't really know if the Clippers would have won that series. And I'm confident in saying that because Porzingis was a matchup nightmare for them. And I think that is where your Jokic statement, it hits true. It hits home. I don't know if anyone on the Clippers can match up with Jokic. I mean, his perimeter game is elite. His mid-range game is elite. His ball handling is elite. And the center on the Clippers is Ivica Zubac and Montrezl Harrell. And their perimeter defending is not the greatest. So they would definitely have to do a mismatch. They would definitely have to either put Marcus Morris on Jokic, or maybe if you want to try, you can maybe put Kawhi Leonard on him. Maybe you can try that out.
Oh, man.
But
Imagine.
I think that'd be pretty funny to see. But I agree. I think there's a mismatch there with Jokic. And if Jokic can go off like maybe Jamal Murray did in the first round, then I don't know about the Clippers. But again, I think – you talk about, like, we're talking about, now I'm going to go to the Clippers side. Paul George has not really shown up yet. And if that guy starts showing up and starts dropping 30, 28, 40 points a game, then this might be a wash. So the Clippers are obviously the more dominant team when they're going. I haven't even mentioned Lou Will yet. So I still got the Clippers winning this. I'll say 6 games, kind of like how the Mavs series went, where at times we're going to see a mismatch and we're going to see Denver maybe dominate. But I think in the long run, the better team is going to win in Kawhi. And Kawhi was dominant in the first round. And I think we're going to see Kawhi just keep doing what he's done the last year and a half. And that's just dominate the playoffs. And I'm really hoping that Paul George starts stepping up because he's always been questioned in doubt in the postseason. And right now everyone's calling him PG 13% because he's not shooting well at all. So hopefully in this series he can get his act together. And if that is going to happen, I got Clippers winning this in 6. But if Jokic and Jamal Murray can continue to play how they've played against the Utah Jazz, and flip a coin on this one because this one's going to go 7. But for now, I'll stick with the Clippers in 6 games.
Yeah, I agree with you there with the 6 games. I'm still going to go Clippers, even though, like, Denver, they do have a matchup problem there with Montrezl Harrell. I like Jamal Murray. I think he's really coming into his own. It's a really good score there in Denver. You got Jokic there. It's just I think the depth is going to come into play maybe down the stretch when you get into like Game 3, Game 4. But yeah, I think you're going to be forced to putting Kawhi on Jokic because what we saw with Boban, that guy, he just swatted the ball out of his hand, just went in. You're going to be forced to do that because I don't like Paul George's game. I'm like, he deserves all the criticism here. This is a guy, you traded Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for him. All those first-round picks, all those second-round picks. Like, you expect results if you're doing that. And I think George needs to really step up. He's going to be criticized even more if they get eliminated here. If they don't even make it to the Western Conference Final, that's like a benchmark for them. I think that's where they expected to be. And then the final. So if you can't get to a West Final with Kawhi and Paul George is going to be the one to blame. Maybe even Kawhi is going to look at this team and like, you know what, fuck this. I'm going to probably leave in a year. So they're in a difficult situation. But looking on to the other matchup in the West, we got the Lakers now waiting in on Houston and OKC. And if OKC pulls off the upset, what are you doing in Houston?
I'm so happy you asked that question. I'm blowing it up, and I'll start with Mike D'Antoni. He's been on this team for 8 years now. Ever since James Harden has gone to Houston, we all know that they've made the playoffs every single year, and that's relatively because of the greatness of James Harden and what he's done for 8 years. And I think his career in OKC, I think he averaged around 16 points a game on relatively low minutes, and then he goes to Houston, and his career average in Houston, I think, is like 30 or 28 or some ridiculous number like that. So I'm definitely not trading James Harden. I don't think he's the problem. I don't think he ever was the problem. You could talk about him not being clutch and, not getting the job done. But again, that was against outstanding Golden State Warriors teams. So you can't really blame James Harden there. I mean, you did trade Chris Paul. So if Chris Paul ends up beating Russell Westbrook in this series, then this is one of the biggest strikeouts of all time in terms of a trade. You traded Russell Westbrook to upgrade at point guard, and then the guy that you trade beats you in Game 7. I mean, we saw in Game 6, Chris Paul was the hungriest guy on the court. He was the best guy on the court by far. He dropped 28 points in the game, 3 of 6 from 3. I think he was like 8 of 12 from the field. And then that clutch 3 over Covington. What a shot. That was absolutely insane. And then, you talk about guys that are just amazing in the clutch, and that's Chris Paul. And he will come to play in Game 7. I will call that right now. He will come, and he will be probably the most focused guy on the floor. You talk about guys that want to win. Chris Paul is the definition of wanting a ring. He doesn't have a ring yet. He's 34 years old. This guy wants to win now. And I'm really excited. I wasn't expecting a Game 7 here. I was expecting 6 games by Houston. And, the heart of OKC, I've been saying all year, Billy Donovan, give this guy, I know Nick Nurse won Coach of the Year, but no one gives Billy Donovan any credit because this team, I really thought that they weren't going to go anywhere. I thought they were maybe a 10th seed, maybe a 9th seed in the West. And they finished 5th. And Gilgeous-Alexander's a star now. Gallinari is a great depth scorer. Chris Paul is the point guard. I think I had him the 4th best point guard this year. So, I mean, flip a coin. I think OKC could win this. And if they do, man, Houston has a lot of stuff to look over. And again, we've been saying this for 3 straight years because we've expected Houston to go far and they never have. So on one side of the spectrum, I wouldn't be surprised if Houston lost. But on the other side, I would be because you traded Chris Paul for Russell Westbrook, and then you lose to Chris Paul. So with that being said, Aulino, Mike D'Antoni would probably get fired. Russell Westbrook would probably get dealt, and they would probably go after a monster free agent this year. So Houston would have a lot to look over if they lose, but I still have Houston winning this game. And I think that's just what Adam Silver wants. I think Houston versus the Lakers is an attractive second-round option. It's way more attractive than the Thunder versus the Lakers. So I got Houston winning, but if OKC wins, that's just another win for me too because I want to see Chris Paul face LeBron James. That would be absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And even Westbrook versus LeBron, I kind of want to see him get that inner Mamba mentality out there, that inner Michael Jordan competitive spirit because we all know Westbrook kind of embodies that when he goes on the court. Just he needs to be fired up a little bit. I don't think I think the games he missed kind of took something out of him. Maybe if they win tonight, they go on and face the Lakers, go fire him up, and that's kind of side of Westbrook I want to see. But speaking of games where they need some firing up, let's go to the Raptors because they're down 0-2, and they lost to Marcus Smart yesterday. What are your thoughts on this series right now, and is this panic mode for the Raptors?
I won't say it's panic mode yet because we were down 2-0 last year to the Bucks and we won 4 in a row. But we had Kawhi last year, and that was the difference. And that's what I'm starting to see now this year is if you don't have a guy like a Kawhi Leonard, the offense doesn't run as smoothly as you think. So our offense in the first 2 games, we haven't been getting the shots. We haven't been hitting them. Van Fleet, I love the guy, but I think he's been shooting a little too much. I think he's been forcing the shots. Siakam, on the other hand, he's got to be better. Charles Barkley and Shaq have been saying the last couple of games that Now he's the Batman of the team. Last year he was the Robin, and now he's the Batman. He's the main guy on this team, and he hasn't really been producing as well as we have thought. I got to give all the credit in the world to Marcus Smart. Yesterday he was one of the best players on the floor, if not the best. And I said this, Aulino, 3 months ago. Marcus Smart is going to be your X factor, and he's been their X factor. He's been absolutely incredible. Let's talk about Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, one of the deadliest wings in the league. The pairing that these two guys have and the chemistry that they have is absolutely out of this world. And, of course, you have a coach in Brad Stevens who knows exactly what he's doing. If anything, he can outcoach Nick Nurse on any other night. If I'm the Raptors, I'm a little worried because I did say the Celtics would win this series from day one. I've said all year that the Celtics are the Raptors' kryptonite, and if they had to face a team, they didn't want to face the Celtics. So if the Raptors can come back and beat the Celtics, I got them slated to go to the NBA Finals. But if they lose, I got the Celtics slated to go to the NBA Finals. And that's no knock on the Bucks or the Heat. I just think that the Celtics and the Raptors, they have a little bit more depth, and I think they're a little bit more consistent. But, man, if I'm the Raptors, you got to start not forcing as many threes. You got to be a little bit more aggressive in the paint. And, yes, last night the refs, I guess, were a little bit more in favor of the Celtics. We kind of saw it, especially late in the fourth, where Marcus Smart is – diving and, getting all the calls his way. But that's just how it goes, man. Sometimes officiating is one-sided, and you got to be a professional about it. You got to understand that happens. So next game, I think the Raptors, they just got to bounce back. They got to stay in their zone. I think Kyle Lowry just keep being that leader, that mentor that you continue to be for years on end with this franchise. And a lot of people, they give OG Anunoby a lot of flack for his offense. But last night, he was one of our best players. He was shutting down Jaylen Brown and Kemba Walker as much as he could. We all know Kemba Walker hit that clutch fadeaway late in the game. But OG Anunoby, to me, was probably our best player last night. And I'm sorry, with the depth that we have, he should not be our best player. He's a great player. He's got great upside. But if we want to win this series, Pascal Siakam has to be our best player, and he has to start being a little bit more confident with the ball. And, God, we got to start guarding Jason Tatum. And we got to give this man a lot more respect than he gets because no one talks about Jason Tatum enough. It's either they talk about him too much and they overrate him, or they don't talk about him at all. And I think Jason Tatum so far has absolutely dissected the Raptors' defense perfectly. A lot of people are saying that the refs defend him. But, man, Jason Tatum's a hell of a talent, and I knew from day one that this would be a tough one. But, Aulino, who do you think is winning this series?
It's a tough one. I'm still going to go Raptors in 7 just on history of last year. Like with the Bucks, what you said there, and like going down 0-2, I still think they have that. You just need to get a rhythm. If you can tie it up, it's any game, like anyone's game. It's just, it's tough, man. Fuck. Like you look at what Tatum's able to do with Kemba Walker. But Kemba Walker hasn't been in this situation before. When he was in Charlotte, it was a one and done. He was looking at the first round, and he's out in 5 if he's lucky. So you got to take advantage of you got to take advantage of the playoff experience. And I think Tatum hasn't had playoff experience recently where he's the guy. That 1 year when Kyrie Irving was out and Hayward was out, he stepped into it. But this is really his first year of being that one guy that everyone's looking at for offense and to lead them into the finals potentially. So take advantage of the experience you have on your team. You have veterans like Lowry, Gasol, who have been there before, Norm Powell off the bench, Matt Thomas on the bench, Terrence Davis. You got to start utilizing the three-point options you have, and maybe you can turn this around. But right now I'll still go with the Raptors just on veteran experience. But another interesting one with veteran experience is Miami and Milwaukee because you got Giannis, who's an MVP candidate, MVP winner, and you have Jimmy Butler with Iguodala now in the mix, this young group. Is this like a horrible matchup for Milwaukee?
I won't say it's horrible. I'll just say it's worrisome. You have Iguodala coming in off the bench, who he's been there before. He's won a Finals MVP, for goodness sake. So that's a great addition to any team. Jimmy Butler, though, I mean, like, this guy dropped 40 points, and he still looked upset after the game. Like, he's having fun, but at the same time, he knows how to be serious and when to be serious. So Jimmy Butler to me is the perfect teammate. If Jimmy Butler can outshine Giannis in this series, which he already has in game one, then I have Miami winning this. But Milwaukee has that MVP player on their team, whereas you could say so much about Jimmy Butler, but he's not an MVP player. So I still give the edge to the Bucks. I say Bucks in 7, but anything can happen here with guys like Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero shooting from, the ballpark. They just pull up from way out and they make those shots. Whereas you look at the Bucks, their 3-point shooting maybe isn't as strong as the Heat. And at the end of the day, I think the 3-point shooting is huge in this day and age. I mean, Giannis doesn't have that 3-point shot, but he's a bully in the paint. Chris Middleton hasn't really showed up yet. And kind of like Paul George, if Chris Middleton can maybe start gelling and start maybe averaging 24 in the postseason, then I think this would maybe be a little bit more one-sided than we anticipate. But he hasn't been doing that. And Jimmy Butler has been absolutely outstanding. The only thing that I'm kind of worried about with Miami is Bam Adebayo. I think the matchup with Bam it's unfortunate because I'm pretty sure they have Giannis on him. And even Brook Lopez is a great defensive center. So I don't know if Bam's going to maybe generate a lot of offense in this series. But that's where you can maybe rely on a Tyler Hero, a Duncan Robinson, a Kendrick Nunn, and a Jimmy Butler to lead the way. But it's going to be a close one. I'm rooting for the Heat to win this, but I still got the Bucks taking this in 7 games.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think the Bucks, it's going to be really close. I think maybe if you're looking at the last couple games there in the second round, I think this series has the most potential of having more overtime games than what people are used to. I think a couple of them might go to overtime just of how evenly matched some of their positions are. And then when Butler gets hot, Hero gets hot, and Robinson, I think that might push Milwaukee at some points. But, yeah, I got 7 games. I got Milwaukee winning it and going on to another Eastern Conference final. Guess we'll go on and conclude with wrestling in the ring. We got a new Universal Champion. We got one reign ended in a week. 2 pay-per-views in that Thunderdome, and Roman Reigns now is a heel. So what are your thoughts on Paul Heyman and Roman Reigns aligned together and him being the new champ?
Wow, am I ever excited. I mean, I'm kind of disappointed, too, at the same time with The Fiend and his short reign, but Roman Reigns, man, as a heel with Paul Heyman as the top dog and he's now the champion, that just screams excellence. I'm intrigued. I'm invested. I think Vince McMahon missed Roman Reigns, and I missed Roman Reigns. So I'm very excited to see this moving forward. This had to be done ever since he beat The Undertaker. Like, this character, ever since he beat The Undertaker, this should have been his character from day one. I mean, and can you just imagine after he beat The Undertaker, the next night he comes out and he aligns himself with Paul Heyman? Like, could you have imagined that 3 years ago? That would have been absolutely insane. But it's even better now because he took his hiatus and then he comes back and he's like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to come back. I'm going to have new teeth, a new look. I'm more jacked. And I'm just going to have a new manager and a new mouthpiece. And I'm just going to come out. What's his shirt say? What is it? Beat people up and walk out or something?
Wreck everyone and leave. Something like that. Yeah.
Wreck people and leave. Yeah. And he's the champ now, so I'm excited for that. And I think he's going to have a long title reign, as he should, because it's his yard.
Oh, yeah, this is yard. And I like how he kind of pissed everyone off there. Like in the Thunderdome, you couldn't really tell at SummerSlam if he was really a face or heel. But having Paul Heyman with him, now you know he's a heel. And I kind of like that. It's something new. Like, he's been the face for so many years now. Like, hit the refresh button a little bit. Try something new with your career. Don't get into the Cena mentality and that thing when you're like a face for 15 years and you get stale after 10. So good on Roman Reigns for doing that. The only thing I think, like with SmackDown, do you have The Fiend now challenge again and come up short? Like, who's going to challenge him now? Because I don't think The Fiend's character can afford another like big loss like that.
See, I was talking about this with a coworker of mine, and I was really gelling out some names on SmackDown. And like Braun Strowman, the last couple weeks, he's been teasing a heel turn as well. I mean, he buzzed his head, and he's been a lot more aggressive. That doesn't mean he's going to be a heel, but he's had some heel tendencies. I don't think I'd have Braun Strowman face Roman. I think I would have Braun face Roman over The Fiend for now. I don't want The Fiend to be face. I mean, I know he would go over as a face, and you know the what's it called? The reaction would be out of this world. But I think he's fine how he is right now. The Fiend, I don't think he really needs to become a face or, change his ways or anything. But a name that I've actually thrown out there, and you could laugh or you can think whatever you want, Aulino, but I've thought of a guy maybe like an AJ Styles. I thought of a Sheamus. I thought of a Daniel Bryan. I thought of even a Jeff Hardy, even though he has the Intercontinental title. Those are all names that I've kind of relatively thought of. You got to think of maybe a babyface that can maybe generate a sort of reaction and like they feel bad for them. So think of like a guy like a Roman Reigns. He's the cocky champion. He's got Paul Heyman there. And just maybe for the first feud for Roman, maybe you can put a baby face in there where he can maybe get squashed and you feel bad for him. So I don't know if that maybe screams maybe I don't know, maybe like a Shinsuke, a Chad Gable. I really like an Otis. Like, do you have Otis maybe try and go for the Universal title? Like, I really have no idea. Like, that's the point. I really don't know who they're going to put up against Roman Reigns. It's going to be fun. I want to see AJ Styles as a face again. I think his work as a heel, he's done tremendous work, but I think now this is where they got to go in emergency mode and have maybe AJ Styles turn face just to face Roman Reigns, because who doesn't want to see AJ Styles versus Roman Reigns? I'd love to see that. But who do you think could maybe face Roman Reigns?
Yeah, when I like what you said about Jeff Hardy. That's a guy I was thinking of if he didn't have the title, which is why I think with Sami Zayn coming back and like saying he's a real Intercontinental champion, I think it could lead to that. Maybe Sami Zayn takes a belt off him and you have Jeff Hardy go for it. I don't want to see Big E yet. I think that's something you can maybe do at a Royal Rumble or even past WrestleMania. I don't think they'll be at WrestleMania. I think they have other plans for Roman. Maybe either with The Rock or maybe they try that Goldberg match again. But I still think Big E versus Roman could be a big main event that could help lead to Big E's push as a singles competitor, reach that next level. Yeah, Jeff Hardy, I think that's a perfect name. Good baby face with the crowd. He has that story that you can have Roman and Paul Heyman talk about and lead to Roman just being hated more and more. I think that's what they're slowly building towards. They have Retribution now also on Raw. So I don't know. Could Roman be the leader of Retribution when this is all done?
That'd be absolutely fantastic. I still think it would probably result in like Aleister Black leading it. I think that would be the better option because he's on Raw and he's a heel. I think that just makes more sense. You can maybe have Kevin Owens come out and maybe try and beat down this team, like this faction, and then Aleister Black just comes out, maybe all in black, and just shows that he's the guy that's behind it. I'm all for Aleister Black's heel turn. I think he needs to eventually maybe get into the main title picture. I don't know if that's against Drew McIntyre down the line. Like maybe they'll give him a one-off or something like that. But it would also be funny if it was Seth Rollins leading it. But I don't think it is Seth Rollins. I think he already has Buddy Murphy and his guys there. So I don't see that. But if it's Roman Reigns, that is insane. That would be absolutely awesome. That would be a curveball. That would be something that I really would not anticipate. I mean, it kind of gives off Shield type vibes. So it would kind of make sense. They're all in black and they attack everyone. And that's kind of what the Shield did. So that would kind of be like a full circle thing. And that would make sense. But if Paul Heyman's with that, that would just throw everybody off. It's like, oh my God, like you have this faction, you have Roman Reigns as the leader and the champ, and then you have an advocate and you have a manager like Paul Heyman. Wow, that would be absolutely amazing. I would be all in for that. I highly doubt that's the case, but if it is, wow, that's awesome.
I guess we'll close off with this one because speaking of a Heyman guy, there's one who's a free agent attracting interest from every company possible, Brock Lesnar. And there's a big event on Saturday, All Out in AEW. Can you imagine the absolute shit show if this pay-per-view ends with Brock Lesnar coming out and officially signing with AEW?
I think, you know how I just said I would be surprised if Roman was the leader? Add another notch to that, and that is me. If Brock Lesnar goes anywhere but WWE, I'll be shocked because he's been in WWE. He's gotten handed everything. He's probably been the best booked wrestler of all time. I mean, he ended the streak. He comes back time and time again, and he keeps getting the Universal title and the WWE title, and he gets handed everything and the money. It's great. His relationship with Vince McMahon was always amazing. So if he goes to AEW, I really don't know what that means for Vince McMahon and his well-being moving forward because he absolutely loves Brock Lesnar. You know what? I could kind of picture him coming to AEW and F5ing John Moxley and holding up the AEW title. I mean, I can only see him going to AEW just to add another different title to his resume because he has the UFC championship. He's had almost every accolade in WWE. And then now you go to AEW and you can win the AEW championship. I mean, why not? He's what, 43, 44 now?
Yeah.
He could do that now in his career. So kudos to him. And if he does go to AEW, I only wish Brock Lesnar the best. He's one of the best pro wrestlers and one of the best actors that I've seen in a long time. He does his job beautifully well, whether it's a 5-minute match, a 2-minute squash match, a 10-minute match. Every match that he is involved in, we're all invested in. So I've had to give Brock Lesnar credit to where credit is due. Ever since 2012 till now, I never thought his run would be this long in WWE. But maybe now it's finally time for something different for him. So if he goes to AEW, I'm all in for him. And he will go all out at All Out.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Like, okay, I'm looking at all these people saying he's going to go back to fighting in the UFC, but he's 43 years old. They have USADA drug testing. And looking at Brock Lesnar, I'm pretty sure he's clean. Yeah, okay. That's going to be something where that's a hurdle. That's a lose-lose for him. And in terms of AEW and Vince McMahon's well-being, like, if you have Brock Lesnar and you're booking him like that, I'm not even putting him in a position where he can answer a phone and potentially make money because that's where his mind is going to be, making the most money possible. So I think this is bad on WWE's part. You should have, as soon as this contract had 1 day on it, you should have froze that thing solid. Should have said, all right, we have a negotiation period. Here's like $1 million for a month. We're talking here. Don't go to AEW. Don't do anything like that. Now you have AEW who, if they sign Brock Lesnar, now you just have a guy WWE booked like crazy, no fallback plan. That'd be a win-win for AEW, and I think that would be something that gets their brand to the level of Raw and SmackDown instead of competing with the developmental and NXT.
Now, like, in terms of, like, we've talked about, like, the negative factor with WWE if Lesnar left, but I think there's also a positive side to that. I think if Lesnar left, this is now where you go all in with Roman Reigns and you go all in with Drew McIntyre as, like, your pinnacle guys, the guys that you look at as those big dogs. Even maybe you can, down the line, maybe you can experiment with Braun Strowman again down the line at some point, because we all know Braun Strowman. I think his better days are still around. I don't think Vince McMahon has given up on him yet. So if Brock Lesnar were to potentially leave WWE, I think that could also benefit the future of the company, and you could kind of relatively start going towards a more futuristic type set of moves like Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. Like, yes, they've been in WWE for almost a decade, but they're still like 34 years old. They're really young still, and they could still go another like 8 years. So they're still the future. Drew McIntyre is another guy. He can go another 6-7 years, maybe even longer. Now, like, I'm starting to realize that age really is not. It doesn't really matter in wrestling because AJ Styles is 46 and he's still one of the greatest in the industry. So even a guy like a Daniel Bryan, where I relatively maybe thought that he was going to retire, he had one of the best heel runs in 2018 that I've ever seen, changing the belt and, having Kofi Kingston have his moment. So in terms of all of this, where Brock Lesnar potentially leaves, I think it could also be very beneficial to the WWE product in that you could, maybe start moving towards the future fan base. You could start acknowledging guys like Drew McIntyre a little more openly. You could start acknowledging maybe a guy like a Biggie Langston, a Keith Lee, these guys where maybe they didn't have the spotlight before where Brock Lesnar's around. So now maybe with Brock Lesnar out of the picture, these guys can finally have that opportunity, and the fans can finally start to realize, holy crap, we got a couple big bad monsters in this roster other than Brock Lesnar. So I think if Brock Lesnar leaves, they can start, finally utilizing their talent to the best of their abilities.
Yeah, and I know we're fantasy booking here, so like I like that on WWE, but if by slim chance Brock Lesnar is in AEW, how should they book him? Because this is going to be a topic that a lot of people, if he signs, they're going to say, okay, is he going to just dominate the roster and do the same old? Or will they throw a curveball and have him like have competitive matches with Kenny Omega, have a competitive match with Chris Jericho, and like actually show, oh, wow, he's dominating WWE guys because he's so much better than them. And AEW is having competitive matches because the competition is just better than WWE. Is that a route they should be going towards?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say when you're a different wrestling promotion, try and not do the same thing. Try and be as different as you can. And I think if Brock Lesnar were to go to AEW, I think relatively we just assume title scene right away. I think that would be the case. You could also maybe see him butt heads with Brian Cage. I think that would be absolutely that could be a fantasy match for a lot of people. But I think in the long run, I agree with what you just said. I think if you want to go to maybe All Out or what's their biggest pay-per-view again? It's
yeah, All Out. So sad.
All Out is their biggest pay-per-view. So I would probably maybe build up Kenny Omega versus Brock Lesnar as like your marquee match. Doesn't have to be for the title. It could just be an interpromotional match, one-on-one. You can go for like 35. If Brock can go for 35 minutes, go for as long as you can. And that would probably be a match of the year. I would not doubt that at all. Kenny Omega is one of the greatest wrestlers. And as well, Kenny Omega has not had his time to shine yet in AEW. So I think that would also be perfect timing. Let's say Kenny Omega turns heel and beats Jon Moxley for the AEW title. And then you see a Brock Lesnar just waltz in as maybe a badass face. That would be absolutely incredible. You could have Kenny Omega as that dickhead heel, and then you could have Brock Lesnar come in as that badass baby face that everyone will be cheering for. So it'd be a win-win for internet fans. You have the badass Brock Lesnar everyone would be cheering for, and you have the internet badass insane wrestler in Kenny Omega that also everyone will be cheering for. So in that frame of mind, it's a win-win for AEW, but I can't be speaking for AEW. So I hope if Brock Lesnar leaves and goes to AEW, hopefully they don't screw it up. I hope they don't, just make him run over everybody and, do the same thing that they did with WWE, because change is awesome. Change is unique, and the wrestling industry definitely needs change in that regard, because we've seen the same from Brock Lesnar for years now. So can you just imagine if you put on like a 25-minute classic with Kenny Omega out of nowhere? I feel like that would be newsworthy. That'd probably be one of the most standout things to happen in this year. So I think if Brock Lesnar leaving WWE to go AEW would be absolutely fantastic for him. It's something new, and hopefully AEW has something new and interesting to offer Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, and I think Brock Lesnar, 100%, it would open a door with New Japan after, because then it makes AEW more valuable. And speaking of inter-promotion matches, you can then have Okada versus Brock Lesnar. It opens the door for Kenny Omega versus maybe Naito again, or they can have like some of these inter-promotional things. I think you need a guy like Brock Lesnar, because Jericho only can do so much. Now that he's 50, like, he's not going to go all out with that. Like, it's going to be harder for him to do something, like, even bridge the gap there. But you had Brock Lesnar, is a little bit more younger, still athletic as all hell. You can add him to the mix. It makes your roster a little bit more valuable to New Japan, and you can have these big events together. And I'm just like, before we end here, just on the topic of free agents and pro wrestling, like, I was looking at some of the reaction, like, oh no, don't sign Brock Lesnar. It's you can put that money elsewhere. What do you think on that? Like, on free agency and pro wrestling, should companies stay away from signing big names just because of who they are?
I think it depends on what your status is as a company. I think if you're TNA, you need to sign the big guys. And I think if you're more like New Japan and AEW, maybe hold off on it. Maybe try and build up the future like Darby Allin, MJF, and guys like that. But if I'm looking at free agency, the first guy I'm looking at is Will Ospreay. That's the number one pick for me. I think he's the guy. I think he's already been on PW Insider. I think he's already been a Wrestler of the Year. I think he's 27 years old.
Crazy.
If I'm WWE, I'm giving him a call. If I'm AEW, I'm giving him a call. I would actually, if I'm WWE, I'm going after if I'm AEW, I'm going after Will Ospreay over Brock Lesnar. But I think, well, at least in the long run, but I guess maybe for now at All Out, now with all these news and all these rumblings, maybe you go after Brock Lesnar for maybe the short term. What's the word? Like he'll definitely make AEW relevant. Like let's say like AEW isn't as relevant right now, or fans aren't watching as much or generating as much, revenue. Brock Lesnar will definitely bring that, no doubt about it. If Brock Lesnar were to debut at All Out, the viewership would skyrocket for AEW in the coming months. So I think if I'm AEW, I'm absolutely going after long term. I'm going after Will Ospreay over Brock Lesnar, but if I want revenue and I want viewership right now, it's easily Brock Lesnar. There's no one else that could bring more viewership than Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And we'll leave it at that for episode 95. This was fun. We talked a little hockey, we talked hoop, and we talked wrestling. Chris, this was fun. So hopefully next week we'll get Pagniello back in the mix here. We're missing Pagniello's takes here. We're missing Mikey's minute. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Get Pagniello back. But that was episode 95. Stick around. Look at past episodes. If you want to join in on the discussion, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at ITZ_podcast and at ITZ podcast on Facebook. I'm Giancarlo Aulino. That's Chris Martelli, and we're signing off.